Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's explainer. We're rolling up our sleeves and unpacking the Thermax Work Permit System Protocol, specifically document OCP 68. Now, if you've ever stepped onto a complex industrial site, you already know that safety isn't just some corporate buzzword, right? It's a rigid, non-negotiable framework designed to keep everyone alive. So today, our main goal is to really explore the critical, life-saving duties of permit issuers and receivers during complex operations. We're going to map out exactly how these distinct roles come together to form a mandatory safety handshake before any high-stakes work even begins.
Here's our roadmap for the explainer. We'll kick things off by looking at the high stakes that make these strict safeguards so essential. Then we'll clearly define our two key players, dig into their specific duties, trace the actual execution workflow, and finally wrap it all up with the ultimate principle of shared responsibility.
All right, let's get right into Section 1, High Stakes, Strict Safeguards. So we really need to recognize the gravity of what we're looking at here. This is definitely not just bureaucratic red tape. Think about it. What actually stands between a routine, everyday job and an absolute site disaster? Well, at Thermax, before any activity kicks off, a risk assessment happens. But when that assessment flags a considerable risk to either the plant or the people, basic precautions just aren't going to cut it. The answer? The work permit system. It operates as a strict safeguard. It is literally a binding safety contract that has to be fully executed before a single tool is lifted. And this brilliantly illustrates why that standard operational playbook just gets tossed right out the window. This strict contract gets triggered immediately for high-intensity stuff. We're talking working in confined spaces, dealing with known asphyxiating atmospheres, carrying out hot and cold work, handling high or low-tension electrical systems, and working at dangerous heights. For these specific activities, you absolutely have to enact special, carefully monitored safeguards. Moving right along to Section 2, defining the key roles. Think of these folks as the protagonists of site safety. If the work permit is the script for site safety, well, these are our lead actors. First up, we have the authorizing person, usually just called the issuer. You can think of the issuer as the high-level planner and verifier. Depending on whether you're at an EPC site or an O&M site, this is going to be an area engineer, a site in charge, or maybe a shift manager. And here's the kicker. Their role is absolutely not just rubber stamping a piece of paper from a comfy desk. They have to verify procedures, and crucially, they are mandated to authorize the permit only after conducting a personal physical inspection right at the location of the proposed works. On the other side of this transaction, we've got the pompitant person, better known as the receiver. If the issuer is the big picture planner, the receiver is your on-the-ground executor. These are typically your contractor, engineers, supervisors, or maintenance managers. And the protocol is incredibly strict about their physical presence. The receiver must be in continuous attendance at the site. No exceptions. They're the ones either doing the work or directly supervising the crew doing it. Plus, they have to be able to whip out that permit to work immediately, the very second it's requested by safety personnel. All right, Section 3, Duties of the Issuer. This is all about guaranteeing the groundwork. The issuer carries just immense responsibility before the ink even hits the permit paper. I mean, they are laying the absolute foundation for survival here. According to the standard, the issuer is responsible for determining the entire nature and extent of the job, plus identifying literally every possible hazard. But their absolute most critical duty? Guaranteeing environmental safety. They have to ensure all necessary isolations are done: electrical, process, mechanical, instrumentation, the whole shebang. They must physically verify a state of zero energy or zero power. Only after they've totally secured the environment do they hand over the method statements and risk assessments to the receiver. They are quite literally neutralizing the site's threat matrix. And to maintain the complete integrity of the system, the document drops this non-negotiable rule. An issuer can never, ever write a permit for themselves. This strict separation of powers ensures there's always an independent, fresh set of eyes evaluating the risks. You simply cannot be both the person neutralizing the site and the person executing the hazardous work. It prevents those dangerous blind spots that could actually cost lives. Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 4, Duties of the Receiver, Execution and Team Management. So, building on that incredibly secure foundation laid by the issuer, this is where planning turns into physical execution. The receiver acts as the ultimate on-site team manager. Their duties actually start by helping the issuer identify hazards. Then, once the permit is firmly in hand, they have to provide the names of all persons carrying out the job. Most importantly, and this is a big one, they are completely responsible for delivering a toolbox talk. They have to explain fully to their subordinates the exact nature of the hazards involved and every single precaution required.
From that moment on, their core duty is making sure the work does not deviate 1 single inch from what's detailed in the permit. When you think about these two roles side by side, it really highlights that critical safety handshake we mentioned earlier. On one side, the issuer is managing the high-level system checks. They're creating that sterile, zero-energy environment. On the other side, the receiver takes that perfectly secure environment, briefs their specific team, and executes the micro-level variables without ever breaking the parameters set by the issuer. Neither role can exist without the other. It's just this perfect, vital equilibrium of safety.
Okay, moving into Section 5, executing complex operations. Let's see this workflow in action.
Now, what's really interesting about this workflow is how the handshake plays out in real time. The procedure maps this collaborative loop perfectly. It starts right at the top with activity planning and risk assessment. If a permit is required, it moves to the receiver, who preps the toolbox talk. They submit the form, which triggers the issuer to physically inspect the work area. And notice the key decision point here. Are all conditions satisfied? If no, rejected. If yes, authorization is granted, work starts, and it eventually loops all the way down to final closure or renewal. To simplify that dense visual workflow, it basically breaks down into 5 really clear sequential steps. The activity is identified, the receiver briefs the team, the issuer physically inspects the ground reality, the permit is officially authorized, and finally, after the job is done, the receiver brings the permit back to the issuer for a final inspection to officially close it out. It's a closed-loop system of continuous accountability. But hey, industrial sites are incredibly dynamic environments, right? What happens if the conditions suddenly change? Like, what if the sun sets, the wind speeds up out of nowhere, or gas concentrations fluctuate? Suddenly, those original permit parameters are completely invalid. The rule here is incredibly strict. The permit must be renewed with a totally fresh inspection of the area by the authorizing person. You simply cannot rely on morning safety checks for evening weather conditions. And speaking of time, there is a hard temporal boundary built straight into this protocol: 12 hours. A work permit's validity shall absolutely never exceed this number of hours. This guarantees that no high-risk operation just drags on indefinitely without a mandatory, documented pause to reassess the safety of the site and, of course, the fatigue levels of the workers. Bringing us home to Section 6, Shared Safety, Shared Responsibility, this is the ultimate takeaway. This entire highly structured system of workflows relies entirely on collective vigilance and total transparency when it comes to record keeping. To actually enforce this, every single work permit is generated in 3 physical copies. The white copy is retained by the issuer and eventually handed off to the safety officer for system audits. The pink copy stays directly with the workers actively executing the task, that's the receiver's team, and the yellow copy goes straight to the contractors for their records. The permit is quite literally distributed across every level of the site, so everyone knows exactly what was agreed upon. So the crucial point is captured perfectly in this overarching mandate from the Thermax text. Even with issuers guaranteeing zero energy and receivers conducting those thorough toolbox talks, individual responsibility remains absolute. Furthermore, the text explicitly states that literally any person on site may ask for reasonable additional safety precautions to be taken. The system empowers everyone, and I mean everyone, to speak up. Which leaves us with this final thought. When you look at the distinct, heavy duties of the issuer and the receiver, it becomes blindingly clear that this isn't just some bureaucratic checkbox. Next time you step onto a site and see a pink or white slip of paper, ask yourself, are you treating your permit just as paperwork or as a binding contract for someone's life? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and please, stay safe out there.